Hey guys, let's get more news about Dallas, but first, don't forget to subscribe and leave your like. Cowboys have suddenly replaced nearly half of their defensive line. The Dallas Cowboys have been busy over the last week adding experienced depth to their defensive line. They've been so active, in fact, that nearly half of the projected roster members weren't with the team at the start of training camp. How should we feel about this much turnover so close to week 1? Within about a week, Dallas traded for DT Jordan Phillips and signed 2 free agents in D. Carl Lawson and DT Linval Joseph. Some have personal connections to the Cowboys coaches. Joseph played several years under Mike Zimmer in Minnesota and Lawson had a year with assistant Paul Guenther in Cincinnati. All have considerable NFL experience and are good fits for Zimmer's scheme. A few weeks earlier, Dallas also added lesser-known pass rushers Alquadin Muhammad and Shaka Toney. This came in the aftermath of Sam Williams' season-ending knee injury, so a need was there, but it also indicated the Cowboys' lack of comfort with their existing depth options. Toney has since been waived injured, but Muhammad has done enough to be on the roster bubble. While August roster moves aren't unusual, the extent to which Dallas has revamped the defensive line this month is abnormal. For some, it's the kind of activity they clamored for all spring when the lack of depth was obvious. Even after the draft and the additions of D. Marshawn Kneeland and DT Justin Rogers, it was clear that the Cowboys were thin at both positions. The top of the depth charts may not be impacted much. Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence are still your primary ends, and Osa Odigizua is the top tackle. The only starter who may be affected is Mazi Smith, who has improved in his second training camp but is still very much a work in progress. We will likely see Phillips and Joseph get snaps that back up options like Rogers. Albert Huggins, or Carl Davis, now released, weren't going to. Hopefully, this relieves some pressure on Smith and allows all to be more effective in a rotation. At DE, Lawson walks in as at least the 4th guy behind Parsons, Lawrence, and Kneeland. We haven't seen enough from Muhammad or Tyrus Wheat to think they'll command snaps, and neither Chauncey Galston nor Viliami Fehoko are pass rushers. Of those 4 guys, only one may actually make the roster now. While the new wave brings plenty of name recognition, they're not without considerable risk. Lawson only played 6 games last year for the Jets and had 0 sacks. Phillips was traded away for next to nothing by the Giants, indicating he probably wasn't going to make the roster. And Joseph, who turns 36 in October, hasn't played a full season since 2020. These risks are mitigated by the fact that none of the veterans are being asked to be full-time starters. Even if Phillips gets the occasional first snap in games, Mazi Smith will likely still have more total snaps by the end of the year. As we saw with Jonathan Hankins and Dante Fowler in recent years, a rotation role can allow some veterans to look their best when on the field. So if these moves were necessary to make the coaches and front office more comfortable, what took so long? The Williams injury certainly changed the landscape but had nothing to do with defensive tackle, where more of the change has occurred. Why did Dallas wait so long to pull these triggers? Wanting to see what younger guys can do is never a bad thing. Smith, of course, needed evaluation, but so did Kneeland, Rogers, Wheat, and other prospects. Work those phones, Stephen Jones. Why cut down trades are likely coming for the Dallas Cowboys. Final roster cuts are less than a week away. On Tuesday, August 27, teams must reduce rosters in one fell swoop from the current 90 to a maximum of 53 players. Those roster cuts are usually accompanied by a flurry of trades both before and after the deadline, and the Cowboys have not been averse to joining that flurry, at least since Will McClay took over as the VP of Player Personnel in 2013. Here's an overview of the Cowboys' trade activity around final roster cuts since then. In 2013, a trade didn't materialize until after final roster cuts when the Cowboys traded for LB Edgar Jones from the Kansas City Chiefs on the day after final roster cuts. They then followed that up by trading DT Sean Lissimore to San Diego and TE Dante Rosario to Chicago the next day, both for 7th-round picks. In 2014, they traded DE Ben Bass to New England for CB Justin Green in mid-August and traded for DE LeVar Edwards on the day of final roster cuts for a conditional 7th-round pick. In 2015, the Cowboys acquired RB Christine Michael in a trade with Seattle for a conditional 7th-round pick after final roster cuts and traded for Oakland WR Bryce Butler a week later. In 2016, Denver contacted Dallas to try to trade Mark Sanchez prior to final roster cuts, but the Cowboys didn't budge, though they quickly signed Sanchez once the Broncos released him. In 2017, they acquired CB Benwikere in a trade for a conditional 6th-round pick in 2019, with Cincinnati on the day of final roster cuts. One day after final roster cuts, they traded for LBJ Roan Elliott out of Green Bay for a 2018 conditional 7th-round pick. In 2018, they acquired OG Parker Ehinger in a trade with Kansas City for CB Charvarius Ward a day prior to final cuts. Ward went on to win a Super Bowl with the Chiefs, lead the league in pass defenses with the 49ers last year and made the Pro Bowl and second-team All-Pro. Ehinger never played a snap for the Cowboys. From 2019 to 2022, obviously exhausted by the flurry of activity the previous years, the Cowboys rested. Last year, the Cowboys came back with a vengeance when Jerry Jones put on his GM cape and traded a 4th-rounder for Trey Lance 3 days prior to final roster cuts. And earlier this week, Jerry Jones hinted the recent moves for defensive linemen won't be the final pieces to the puzzle. None of the roster cut trades listed above delivered world beaters to Dallas. But expecting world beaters from these types of trades is not realistic anyway. These trades are about plugging obvious roster holes. Why Dallas Cowboys QB Trey Lance is expected to make a trade request next, per analysis. A few months ago, the Cowboys decided not to exercise the 5th-year option on Lance's contract. This move was widely anticipated given the team's existing cap commitments, particularly the significant $40.137 million cap hit for starting quarterback Dak Prescott in 2025. With Prescott, Cooper Rush, and now Lance all scheduled to become free agents in 2025, the Cowboys have opted to maintain flexibility in their quarterback situation by declining the 5th-year option for Lance. The former 3rd overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft was acquired by the Cowboys from the San Francisco 49ers last August, but he remained inactive for the entire 2023 season. Since his contract wasn't renewed by Dallas, there's a good chance Lyles may find himself requesting for a trade sooner than later. This can happen, according to an NFL analysis by Ryan Fowler for Bleacher Report. 2024 is a critical year for Lance, who needs development and on-field experience at 24. Lance is in a battle with Cooper Rush for the backup role, so there's no guarantee that he will be QB2. Even if he wins the backup job to put himself one snap away from action should Prescott suffer an injury, Lance may value the chance at winning the QB1 job with a team lacking an established starter. An organization searching for fresh legs at the position, without having to allocate high draft capital, could find Lance an appealing target, offering him a chance to compete for a starting gig, Fowler wrote. Of the 4 quarterbacks selected in the first round of the 2021 draft, only Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars had his 5th-year option exercised. The Cowboys, however, have opted to pick up the 5th-year option on defensive end Micah Parsons, solidifying his future with the team. It remains to be seen where Lance will end up before his current contract ends. Hopefully, a trade request will send him to a team where he'll be used productively. And you, fan? What do you think of the situation of Trey Lance? Leave your opinion in the comments.